Power 106.5 Speak Life Radio. I am Pastor Leon Purley, and I am on with not only Janet Gale as my sidekick tonight, but also we have a special guest, one of the senators in Oklahoma by the name of Nathan Dahm. How are you doing tonight, brother?
Great. Thank you guys for having me on. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so the first question I want to, just go right in to Nathan is, how did you get started in politics, brother? And you can start way back when, if you like.
Sure. Well, I actually grew up overseas as a missionary kid. My parents were missionaries, so I grew up over in Romania, which was one of the formerly communist nations in Eastern Europe. So when you live out of the United States, you really cherish it more. It's just kind of that old saying that when you don't have something, you really value it even more.
Yeah.
So because I was living overseas, I really appreciated what America is for the entire world, the beacon of hope and light and freedom that America has been, the example that America has set. And so I always loved our history, studied our founding documents, all of that for years while I was over there. And then I ended up moving back to Oklahoma back in 2007, which is where I grew up when I was younger, before we moved to Romania, and it's where my parents had their home base, and so we'd go back there every year, so that was always home. So I went back to Oklahoma, back to Broken Arrow, and in summer of 2007, and that's when they were having all the talks about the massive TARP bailout for the banks, the $700 billion that they were going to print up to take care of some of the toxic assets and that whole situation. And I was hearing them talking about it, and my first thought was, well, first of all, this is unconstitutional. They can't be doing this. This is a total violation of the Constitution. Mm-hmm. And then secondly, my thinking was, well, this is just going to cause all kinds of problems with the economy, with inflation, and having lived over in Romania, we saw inflation, terrible inflation that just wiped out people's retirement accounts, wiped out their saving accounts. It was hard to even get by. Families, multiple generations had to move in together, pool their resources just to be able to survive, to be able to keep up with the inflation, because their currency was so debased that the wages and everything weren't keeping up with the inflation. So I realized that that's the path that America was going down, and like I said, this was back in 2007. So I got actively involved in government, in local party politics, and doing what I could, helping other people, and supporting other candidates and different things. And then talking to other people, and somebody told me, well, you could do more than just helping other people. You could run yourself. So I did that, and then actually ran for a different office here back in 2012 when I was elected to the Oklahoma State Senate for District 33. So I've been, I see the direction that America is going, could go. I kind of saw it before we started down this path, because this is a path that a lot of other nations have gone down, and it never ended well for any of them. So that's what really was my drive to get me involved, and why I decided to not just help others, but step up myself and get involved in this capacity. So that's kind of a long story, but that's kind of the nutshell of how I got involved and where I'm at now.
That's good. That's really good. For those who are just now tuning in on Power 106.5 Speak Life Radio, we have Senator Nathan Dahm on with us tonight, along with Janet Gale as a special guest. And so the next question, Nathan, I know you've heard this 1,000,001 times in life. People shouldn't talk about religion or politics. And so the next question, I want you to elaborate on your testimony of when you gave your life to Christ, like your salvation testimony.
Sure, and I know people say that you shouldn't talk about religion or politics, but those are the two things that more than anything else, politics affects pretty much every area of our life, whether we're talking about specifically the government and the laws and the regulations and the things that they pass, or if we're just talking about politics, the art of of negotiation or compromise, or you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. That stuff is in every area of life, not just in government. I mean, you have politics in schools, in businesses, unfortunately, even in the church. Mm-hmm. So I know people say we shouldn't talk about it, but it's something that should be talked about because it's something that permeates every level of society. And then as far as, talking about Christianity or your faith, I know a lot of people say you should shy away from that, and especially when you're in the public sphere, there's supposed to be this separation of church and state. And even though that's nowhere to be found in our founding documents, in the Constitution, the Declaration, separation of church and state is never mentioned. We're supposed to have freedom of religion. That's what's mentioned. And freedom of religion also means freedom to live your faith, express your faith, and talk about your faith. And so, I'm not ashamed to say that yes, I'm a Christian. That I had the good fortune of being raised in a Christian home. My mom was raised in a Christian home, but my dad wasn't. And so, when he came to Christ, he had a life-altering, life-changing experience, and has, totally lived his life serving God. That's why they're on the mission field still to this day. They dedicated over 20 years of their lives to the people of Romania. And so they set that example for me. And, so I was born again at an early age when I was still just a child. I told my mom one time, I was like, Mom, I said, I realize I need Jesus. I need Jesus in my heart. Fortunately, I like I said, grew up in the church, so had gone to Sunday school, had learned about that, had heard the salvation message from an early age. And so, she took me and led me through the prayer, and I prayed and accepted Jesus as my Lord and Savior, and say that, I want to live my life for Him. And so that's what I believe, that in everything we do, it should be in service to God, because yes, we're here on this earth, and we need to work for and with other people, but we need to have our sights set on eternity and what we can do for eternity for other people, not just here in the here and the now, in the present.
That's really good, really good. Senator Nathan Dahm said it best, man. Share with us, man, some of your biggest obstacles in life, just trying to make change and improvements in politics. What have been some of the things that you face, some of the toughest obstacles in your life thus far? You can name 2 or 3.
It was another senator that actually said this first, and I realized that, that's one of the main problems that we all face, is just simply change. People don't like change. They don't want change. When they get comfortable with something, or even if they're slightly uncomfortable, but it's still working, it's not unbearable, people will still, it's better to just be where they're at than change. I mean, the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson said the same thing, that people are, to paraphrase, he said, people are willing to suffer as long as the sufferability is bearable, basically. He said that people will stay in the state that they're in until it gets unbearable. And so that's the biggest problem that we probably face, just everyone, especially in the government, political sphere, is that people don't want to change. When we talk about making changes or improving things or different things, they always say, oh, well, it's worked this way for decades or so many years, or why do we need to change this? Or, they're always fighting change. They just don't want to change. They don't see the value of improving. And I'm not saying we need to change just for the sake of change. When there's things that can be improved, things that can be fixed, things that can be made better, we should always be striving to do that. So that's just kind of generally in government the thing that we experience the most. But then for me personally, the thing that I probably experienced in my first year, especially up there, and still to some degree, but being younger, that's always a challenge when there's mostly older people there, some of whom, have kids my age, and some of them even have grandkids my age or older than me. So they look at me as like, well, would I want my grandchild in that position, doing that, making those decisions? And that's always a challenge. They don't realize that I'm not their grandchild. I'm a different person, a different individual. And so that's always been kind of on the forefront. A challenge is, who's this young kid, so to speak, and what does he know? Who does he think he is? Who's he to come in here and try to make these changes? So that's kind of the biggest challenge that I've probably experienced in my now 3 years there at the Oklahoma State Senate.
That's really good. That's really good. And how do you feel about like Social Security cuts and vulnerable adults who have to depend on other people? Like, what's your take on that? Because a lot of people have told me, I'm 32 now, and by the time I reach my 60s, I may not even have Social Security. So now I'll probably I'm gonna have to work 2 or 3 jobs, Nathan, and I don't want that, brother. So what's your take on Social Security? Because what would you like to see improved, or would you like it to just stay the same?
Well, and actually, we're in the same boat. I didn't realize we were the same age. I'm 32 as well.
Oh, wow. That's good.
I'm right there with you. Social Security is unsustainable the way it is right now. When it was originally set up, to be honest, it was set up as a Ponzi scheme. They set it up knowing that there'd be more people paying into it for a longer period of time than would be taken out of it. So they set it up as a slush fund that they could draw from. The problem is now that people are living longer, so they're drawing from it longer. People are drawing from it that, there's more people drawing now than back then. I think it was like 30 to 1 that were, 30 workers were supporting one person that was retired. Now it's 3 to 1.
Man.
Or thereabouts. So we have 3 people working, and for every one person that's pulling from the funds. So it's just non-sustainable the way that we're going, the direction we're going. Unfortunately, part of the problem too is that the church has kind of backed out of some of our social responsibilities because the government stepped up and said that they would do it, that they would take on those responsibilities, and we've let them because it just seemed easier, and because politicians know how to work people and make promises and give out freebies, so to speak. The church just kind of neglected their responsibility. But James made it abundantly clear that it's the church's responsibility. He said true religion in the sight of God and men is to take care of orphans and widows, which means those who cannot take care of themselves. So that's been the church's responsibility, and unfortunately we've neglected it because we looked at Social Security or other things and said, well, the government's going to take care of it, so we can step out now. But the government has proven inefficient and not effective, and Social Security is, it's not going to be sustainable for very much longer. Some people are going to say it's insolvent right now, but it depends on whose numbers you look at. So there's some changes that need to be made for that, but that's going to take people that from all different generations that are willing to see that and address that, because you're right, it's not right that you and I will have to work 3 jobs for the rest of our lives just because somebody came up with this unsustainable system years ago and made more promises than they were able to keep.
That's true. That's true.
But I will say that Social Security is more of a federal issue. It's not something that we really deal with on the state level issue. So that's just kind of my thoughts and perspectives on it. That I hope that those in Washington D.C., our federal congressmen and federal senators, U.S. senators would start working on that. And I know we have a good voice for that in Oklahoma. Senator Langford, actually, I was at a couple of breakfasts with him last week, and he was talking about that, how he was trying to make those changes, or have those discussions, seeing that it's 20 years down the road. He was trying to get those things going now, but people were telling him, oh, well, we don't have to deal with that for 20 years, so we'll just wait and deal with it then. But he's been a leading voice in that, trying to work with that from the things that he said a week or 2 ago when I was at some breakfast with him. So there are people that see it and acknowledge it and are trying to address it.
Okay, absolutely. For those who are just now tuning in, this is Power 106.5 Speak Life Radio. I'm Pastor Leon Purley, on with Janet Gale and our special guest tonight, Senator Nathan Dahm. Go ahead and share with us, Nathan, what type of advice would you give someone who is voting for the very first time? This is a huge thing every time that it comes back around. So I would like to get your advice and hear what you have to say to encourage someone who is about to go and vote for the very first time.
The best thing that I can say is, yes, it's very important to vote, but I encourage people to do their research, do their homework, because a lot of times when you can find sample ballots before you ever get there. So when you show up to actually vote, you don't have to be surprised and say, oh, well, I didn't know that there was this candidate or this race. A lot of people only look at the presidential race and that's the only time they vote is once every 4 years. But there's also, your governor's races and your statewide races. There's your state house and senate. There's your city council, your school board. There's really important elections that people never really get involved with. And there's, even in Oklahoma, there's cities that, the city council can have millions of dollars in budget management, maybe even 50 or 100 million dollars, that the city councilors, 5 to 7 people, determine how that money is spent, and maybe only 300 people get out and even vote. Determine which of those 5 people in their city is going to determine how that money is spent.
Okay.
So there's a whole lot of different races, not just the presidential race. So I would encourage people to get out and vote in every race, but then also, like I said, do the research. You can find a sample ballot well in advance, so you can know who the candidates are, so you can go and do the research on them and find out what they say they stand for. I know that can be a challenge, so somebody actually is what they're saying, does it line up with what they've done?
Yeah.
If they're seeking re-election, you can go back and do some research and see how they've actually voted and see if it lines up. If it's somebody that's never ran before, that's a little bit more of a challenge to find out where they stand on, or if they'll actually follow through with those issues. But if they're a new candidate, it should be really easy to be able to get a hold of them, contact them, go to one of their meetings or somehow, and talk to them about where they specifically stand on the issues that you might have concerns. So you can get that one-on-one time, that FaceTime with them, and actually find somebody that you believe you can support and vote for in full confidence.
Okay, that's really good. Very good wisdom.
Yeah.
Very good wisdom. I would like to know, before I pass it over to Janet, Senator Nathan, your journey, becoming a senator, being elected as a senator. I would like to know, how did it all come about, in a sense? I know not to belabor it, because you shared in the opening question, but some people, they have connections. Some people, hey, I went to college, and then after I graduated, I went here, linked up with a group of people, and they showed me the ropes, and then I started running, and then bam, I'm senator. So share with us briefly, how did it happen for you? Like some of the profound moments during that time that you can remember and say, man, this was so awesome during this time, and then I had my team behind me, and share that with us.
Well, I took a little bit different route than most people do, and I'm a big proponent of, everybody has their own path. God has a plan for their life, and it's not always the same path as somebody else's. Yeah, maybe somebody else went before on that path and kind of cleared the trail, so to speak, a little bit before you in certain ways or whatever, but you can't always judge what you're supposed to do based on what other people have done. In fact, a few months back, I got to actually minister at my church's youth group and share with them about following God's plan for their life. And the illustration I gave at the beginning, I had some volunteers come up and gave them instructions inside an envelope, told them to open it up and follow the instructions, and each one of them had a different set of instructions. And so they raced against the clock, they all accomplished their stuff, and then they came back up to the front, and I asked the crowd, the rest of the youth group, okay, who won? And they said, well, everybody had different instructions, so how do we know who won? And I said, exactly. They had different instructions, but they followed those instructions. So you can't look over to somebody else, one of your other friends, and say, well, they're doing this and I'm doing that, which one of us is right? Well, they both had different instructions. I mean, the best biblical example is Joseph and Moses. They were both very involved in Egypt, but they both had a very different set of instructions of the path that they followed in the nation of Egypt. So I always try to encourage people to find the path that God has for you, the plan that He has for you, and not just follow somebody else's path. But having said that, my path was a little bit different. Grew up over in Romania, like I said, and then after graduating high school over there, I was homeschooled. After graduating high school, I decided to go back over to Romania to serve as a year for a missionary, as a year as a missionary. And I was over there for 1 year, so was looking at different colleges and stuff, but felt that I was supposed to go back to Romania for a year first. After that year, I was praying about it, felt like I was supposed to go back to another year. Every year I added another year and ended up being over there for 6 years after high school. And then in 2007 is when I moved back to the United States. So I actually never attended college. I don't tell people, again, that was the path that I went down. That doesn't mean that I'm not going to do that in the future. I just had a different form of education. I just learned different things in different ways. So then when I came back, like I said, got really involved in government. And with the TARP bailout, my congressman had actually voted for the TARP bailout. And I talked with him on multiple occasions, asked him why he voted for it, and every time he gave me a different excuse. Well, this and that, and we talked about the constitutionality of it, and he really didn't have an answer. And so I started talking to other people and saying, do we know if anybody going to run against him? Is somebody going to challenge him? He's violated the Constitution. He shouldn't be there. He's not representing the will of the people or defending the oath that he took. And I was talking to several different people, and a lady that I really respect, she told me, well, you could do it. You could run. And I said, well, yeah, I guess I could, but I was hoping to find somebody else. And so I prayed about it and felt that was the direction that I was supposed to go. So I went and met with my congressman before I announced it to anybody else outside of my immediate family. Told him that I was running, but not running against him, just basically applying for the position. And I just felt as a man of character, that's what I should do, let him know before I announced it to anyone else. So I ran for that race in 2010. Was not successful in that race as far as the election. But I learned a lot in that process. We had a lot of volunteers, a lot of ground support. And so in 2012, after the 2010 census, they redrew all of our state house and state senate districts in Oklahoma. And the district that I was now living in was an open seat. They moved it actually from a different part of downtown Tulsa to mostly Broken Arrow in South Tulsa County. So it was an open seat. There was no senator there. So somebody called me and told me about that, hey, this is an open seat. If you weren't aware of it, be looking at it. So I started praying about it and just felt that was the direction that I was supposed to go again. So we launched in March. That was kind of a late time to launch our campaign, but had my family really supporting me, had a lot of volunteers, and we just worked really hard, knocked on people's doors pretty much nonstop for several months, and there was 4 Republicans in the primary. Myself and another gentleman advanced to the runoff in August after that June primary, and in the August runoff, I won that race, and that was 2012, and so I've been in the Oklahoma State Senate for 3 years now, and we'll be up for re-election next year. So that's just kind of the path that God took me to get me where I am now.
Man, that's powerful, bro. Well, we're definitely proud of you standing firm in your beliefs and your faith in Christ and everything that you're doing for Oklahoma and across the nation. So before you go, we definitely are going to let you do like some shout outs and stuff at the end. But right now we're going to transition, and I'm going to let Janet Gale step up to the plate and ask you a few questions.
Okay. Well, my question to you, Senator, would be, what are your goals of achievement this year for Oklahomans residing in your district?
I'm actually working on several different things. I've been working on my legislative list for a few months now. I'm just considering some things, praying about some things. One thing that I've pushed since I got into the Senate, and I've had several things each year, is just repealing old laws, archaic laws, things that we don't need anymore. I feel that we have too many laws on the books as it is. There's too many things infringing people's liberty, people's rights, and so I would like to see us have less laws instead of more laws and regulations. So I'm constantly working on repealers. I usually take a few different of our titles. Oklahoma has 70 different titles of law touching different things, and so I just take a few titles over the summer or in the fall, and I'll go through, I'll read the entire section of law, that whole title, and find things that can be removed and repealed. Last election cycle, I read through the whole section dealing with cemeteries, and we had stuff, in there since statehood, since the early 1900s, just old archaic stuff, talking about even forms of government that didn't exist anymore in the state of Oklahoma. So we were able to repeal a bunch of those old laws. But there's other specific things that I've worked on, and I'm going to continue to work on this year. The Second Amendment, the right to self-defense, is something that I'm a huge proponent of. Again, having seen what has happened in Europe, where people don't have that right of self-defense like we have enshrined in our Constitution. So that's one thing that I'm pushing for. And then just for a better business environment, as well, because we do have so many regulations, so many licenses required in the state of Oklahoma. We are not a very business-friendly state. And then also going to be working, and I've worked closely with some other members on making sure that religious liberties, especially, are protected in the state of Oklahoma, because I fully believe, like the founders said, that it's that our Constitution was made solely for a moral and religious people. And so we have to have that morality. We have to have those religious protections in there so that those will work in conjunction with our laws, so that the people have that moral compass instead of just fear of punishment or fear of the law, but they have that moral compass showing them what's the right thing to do rather than just a law telling them that they're going to be punished for the wrong thing. So those are some of the things that I'm going to be working on this next year.
Okay, sounds wonderful. Yes. Okay. Next one would be, how has your faith influenced others since you have become a senator?
Well, one of the things that I've had the opportunity to do, and I've been very thankful for, is, since I was elected, is to go into churches and actually minister in the church on the proper function of the church and be involved in government. Right now, the church kind of has this idea that they bought into the theory of separation of church and state, that we're not supposed to be engaged in government. And I already talked a little bit about politics, that aspect of it, but the church really should be involved in government because it does have an impact on so many different things, including the gospel going forth. In communist nations, in nations where they have dictators, those governments are a hindrance on the gospel being proclaimed. And even in America, certain governmental policies or laws or things that have been implemented have hindered, maybe not to the degree that communist nations or dictatorships have, but they have hindered the gospel going forth. Even the big economic crash that we had, that was an outcome from government policies, government implementation, and with that we saw that giving was down in churches. And churches are the most charitable institutions in America and in the world, helping the poor and helping the needy. And so I've had the opportunity to go into churches and minister on the importance of the church being involved, the role that they can and should play, and how impactful the church can be on government, and how in turn how that can provide protections for the church, provide those religious liberties, those things that are necessary for the gospel to be freely proclaimed. It's very fortunate that we have freedom of speech, freedom of religion, those protections enshrined in our Constitution. Other nations don't have those privileges. So that's one of the things that I've really enjoyed the opportunity to be able to do, and encourage people to get more involved.
I'm so glad you have, definitely. Well, the next thing I'd like to ask you is, what do you see in our nation's future as a whole?
That's, I don't want to say a tricky question, but, it really depends on the direction that the people want to go. The populace, right now we kind of have the government that we have because it's reflective of the mentality of the people, of the desires of the people. So we've seen that throughout history. Even if you look through the history of Israel, they would turn away from God and turn to false idols, and they'd go through rough times and trials and have all kinds of problems, and then they'd turn back to God and they'd be blessed again, and then because they had all these blessings, they'd kind of get soft again and they'd turn away from God. It was just kind of a perpetual cycle, and it's unfortunate that people only turn to God in bad times, or when things get more difficult. But that's kind of human nature, so to speak. People say, well, we've tried everything else, now let's try prayer, or we've tried everything else, I guess now let's try God and see what his answer is. So with the direction that we are going, yes, there could be some serious problems ahead, especially economically speaking, financially speaking. Things could get really, really tight. They could be a real challenge for our nation as a whole. But with that, I hope that people will turn to God for the answers and as their source, rather than just turning to government. But I would hope, and I would prefer, that people would start looking to God before things get really bad. And I really do believe that America is primed and ready for another huge revival. another Great Awakening. We've had Great Awakenings in our past, in our history. I mean, the First and Second Great Awakenings were huge movements of God throughout the entire United States, and even, covered in newspapers, and people talk about it. And it's not only in America. There's been revivals throughout all kinds of different nations that have changed the direction and the path of the nation, that they were, that brought them up to new heights, new levels where they were abundantly blessed. And so I truly believe that that's what's ahead and in store for America is a revival. I just hope that it doesn't come about because of difficulties, but it comes about because people are turning to God right now, and that's what I encourage people to do, is to look to God for as their source, as the answer. I say it all the time that government isn't the solution. Government is the problem. That's the old Ronald Reagan quote. But I like to add on to it and say, but there is a solution, and it's God. God is the solution.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. Okay. Very good. What are your thoughts on the Supreme Court passing the same-sex marriage law?
Well, I have some strong views on the Supreme Court. I think that they have missed it more often than they've been correct. I think that they've, especially of late, become more politicized rather than just being impartial judges like they are supposed to be. And I think that they are trying to politicize things. Even if you read the opinion that they gave on homosexual marriage, you'll see that they basically have no constitutional foundation or authority for it. They kind of just said, well, this is an opportunity for us to get out in the forefront of and change history, and it's almost more of kind of an emotional draw is what they're saying is the purpose for it and the reason for it. They have if we want to talk about marriage, that's an issue for the states. That's a power for the states because it's not granted to the federal government in the U.S. Constitution. So if it's going to be handled governmentally, it should be handled at the state level, and the states have handled it. The states that have addressed it, they've addressed it. But in all reality, marriage is a religious institution. I mean, God's the one that created marriage, and so that's a problem that the church started looking to the government to give validity to marriages, and we never should have let that happen in the beginning. Like I said, the church has given up too much of our proper roles, our proper functions. We've turned those over to the government, and we never should have done that. So now we're seeing the challenges and the repercussions from that. People say it's settled. People say it's the Supreme Court rules, so that's it. But there's going to be plenty more. I'm sure there'll be all kinds of different lawsuits still and all kinds of challenges. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. This is just the start of it. And unfortunately, the problem that we're facing here in America is that people look to the Supreme Court as the be-all, end-all. But what they don't realize is the Supreme Court just issues opinions. We call them rulings. People say, well, they passed the law. Well, the Supreme Court has no authority to pass any law. The Supreme Court is not the legislative branch. The Supreme Court is the judicial branch. They're supposed to issue opinions on specific cases, on a case-by-case basis. But now we're operating under case law in America, and so far off base of what others envisioned that we're seeing the fruits of that, of getting off of that for so long. We're seeing how we've gotten off track and what that has caused. But again, like I said, I mean, a revival in this land could change the nation overnight. So there's political solutions to this. There's natural solutions, but again, what we really need is a spiritual solution to this problem.
Mm-hmm. Definitely, I agree. What's the best thing you like about being a senator?
Oh, I don't know that anybody's ever asked me that one before. Actually, there's certainly things that are nice and enjoyable with it. The thing that I probably enjoy the most about it is the opportunity to go out and speak with other people, to go to groups, go to I've even been to elementary schools and to speak to kids about the proper function of government and So, like I said, I had the opportunity to speak in youth groups and churches and to different clubs and organizations and colleges, and even campaigning, going, knocking on doors and just talking with people. That's probably been my favorite part. I know a lot of people that have known me for years probably would find that interesting, because when I was a lot younger, I was very, very quiet, very shy, very timid. You couldn't get me to say but 3 words, and it was usually yes, no, or maybe. So now, as you can tell with my long questions on this interview, it's almost impossible to get me to shut up sometimes. So I really do. I do enjoy the opportunity, at least, to get out there and talk to people and just share what's on my heart and the vision that God gave me, and talk about the Constitution, the Founding Fathers, and the great heritage that we have in America. So that's probably the best thing that I've been able to experience, is those opportunities.
Awesome. Okay. So what's the most challenging thing about being a senator, would you say?
Well, like I said previously, the idea that people don't want change, that they're not accustomed to change, that lobbyists are paid to fight any sort of change. You know, they don't want change. The system's working for those entities, those interests, the powers that be, so to speak. So why change it? So that's probably been one of the biggest challenges, just from legislatively speaking during session, keeping up with all the bills and reading every bill. I make every attempt to read every bill. I've done that since I've been there. I do keep track, and I think right now there's been about 16 bills that I unfortunately had not had the chance to read before we voted on it, because either it was a huge bill over 100 pages long, and or it was brought up sooner than I was expecting it to be, and so I just I was told that it was going to be brought up later, and somebody had to change it because of scheduling or whatever, so I just didn't get the opportunity to read it like when I had scheduled. So there's been about 16 times where I haven't had a chance to read a bill, and in those instances I just vote no, because I don't believe that I can vote in favor of something that I don't know the content of what's in it. But keeping up on reading the bills, that can be a big challenge, especially during certain deadline weeks. There's been times where I've had to stay up all night reading bills, and just take a quick shower, eat some breakfast, get to the Capitol, and then continue to read bills throughout the whole day while we're on the floor voting and stuff. Those are rare instances, but there's times where it can be an all-nighter, but then there's other times where it still consumes a large portion of time. So that's probably one of the biggest challenges, is just trying to keep up on all that work.
Well, that sounds like a lot. Okay. Well, what type of legacy do you want to leave behind after all this life is over?
That's a really good question. The thing that I would say is that one of my favorite biblical characters is, especially from the Old Testament, is King David. And even though he had his ups and downs and challenges and made his mistakes, the thing that really impressed me and stands out to me is that it says that he was a man after God's heart. Mm-hmm. More than anything, he was known as that, so much so that God said that, through the lineage of David, Jesus would come upon the earth. So that's how much that he was after God's heart, how much he loved the things of God, how much he desired those things. And I really believe that is having God's heart in the heart for people, because that's what God is all about. He loved us so much that he sent his only son, and for humanity, for people. So more than anything, if when I leave this earth, if my legacy is that I was a man after God's heart and followed all his will, and then also, like Paul said, I've run the race, I've finished my course, that would be a great legacy to leave behind.
That's really good, Senator Nathan Dahm, everybody. And so before we go, Senator Nathan Dahm, could you take the time to do some thank yous and shout outs? I really like this part of the show because you get to, big up all the people that have supported you over the years and that have encouraged you from church, from family, and everything. And so I'm going to give you the floor for that.
Oh, I appreciate it. Well, thank you all first for having me on tonight. It's an honor to do this. Appreciate you having me on and giving me the opportunity. obviously, I wouldn't be where I am without God's help and His support. And I really believe that, and I'm just thankful that for the things that He's placed in me, the opportunities that He's given me, and then also my family has been a huge support for me throughout this whole everything that I've done. We are a very tight-knit family, and that's one thing that I love about our family is we all support each other. We all have each other's backs. Even, my parents are still over in Romania as missionaries. I try to go over there every year. My sister just got back from there on Saturday, actually. So we're all just very, very close, very tight-knit. And even my brother, and sister-in-law, they were a huge help on my campaign. They handled all of my design work and mailers and all that stuff. And my sister was my volunteer coordinator, and my parents did everything they could. My mom even came back, for different time periods and helped knock doors and drive cars and just do everything. So I wouldn't be here without my family. So I appreciate them and thank them. And there's so many different volunteers we had actually on our campaign. I think my sister counted one time. And some of them were just, single-time volunteers that just came out once or twice. But we had some people that were there weekly. But we had over, I believe she said when she counted, over 100 volunteers that worked on my campaign in one capacity or another at one time or another. And so, to take the time to name them all would take more time than you guys have on the show. But I'm just thankful for all the volunteers. And then the one person that I would really like to thank is my assistant, executive assistant there at the Capitol that runs my office, Sharon Brown. She does a phenomenal job. We get requests from people all over the state, not even in our district, different constituents that have requests or have challenges, and she does a phenomenal job of working through the bureaucracy, finding the answers to the problems. In fact, just had a voicemail this weekend from a gentleman that we helped resolve a tax issue, and he was just calling us to thank us because once she started working on it, once our office started working on it, it was resolved within about 10 days, and so he was calling to thank us. So she does a phenomenal job with that, and she really does a great job running my office, and she has my back. So there's so many other people that I could mention my name, my pastors, and my home church there, World Outreach Church. There's just so many people that have had an impact in my life, and I wouldn't be where I am without them. So I'm just thankful for all of them and all their help and support.
That's awesome, bro. That's awesome. Before we go and close up the show, you wouldn't happen to have President Barack Obama's phone number on you, do you? Oh, never mind. Don't even worry about it.
I did. I'm pretty sure I'd be blocked after the first text message I sent.
Yeah, it's all good.
Just quote of the Constitution and say, hey, that law violates this section.
Exactly, bro. Well, we truly appreciate you, Senator Nathan, coming on, man. This has been a pleasure. I felt like, I actually had a president on just by you reaching back and coming on tonight. I don't know anything about politics. I got a D- when I was in college, and so I learned a lot from you tonight, and so it's been a blessing. And Janet, thank you for making time to come on as well. And I guess until the next time, this has been Power 106.5 Speak Life Radio. I'm Pastor Leon Purley, and we are gone.